So here's another video on my trusty Murano here. Well, it's got 200 some thousand miles on it, so I know it's going to need work. But the rear shocks were still the original ones with 220,000 miles. And the thing was bouncing around the road pretty bad, so I knew I had to replace them. So I started on the left side, and the bottom bolt, there's three bolts holding it on. The bottom bolt is an 18 millimeter. That came out okay, I guess. It was a little hard, but I got it out. And then the top two bolts holding the mounting bracket underneath, those were both rusted and corroded so bad that there's no way I could get them out. So what I ended up having to do is taking out all this shit on the back end, and you can see this is after it's replaced. I have two new bolts in there to hold the mounting bracket and the new shock, the new shock absorber. And so what you have to do is you have to take out all this stuff in back. Let me get a wide angle view for you here. It wasn't as bad as I thought. One of the trickiest things was these brackets here. Where is it? There you go. These here, I didn't know how the hell these came off. But if you pop up this piece here, there's a screw holding them down. See if I can show that a little better. There's the screw in there. I didn't realize that. And that was one of the trickiest parts. And then here you can see these pieces here that go on. Here, let me show you how that goes. You can see all this other stuff that I had to take out. But the biggest thing was, let me just show you that. These here are held on by a lot of bolts. And the way this goes back in here is kind of just like that. It's held on by very many number of bolts. So I had to take that off. And because this car has 220,000 miles on it, I didn't want to have to take off this whole back piece. So what I did was I just slit each side. You can see here underneath there are the bolts that hold that bracket on, a whole bunch of them. But after I took that bracket off, this area here was all covered by that thick sheet metal. So what I had to do to get to it is I had to take my angle grinder cutter and I cut that sheet metal out in order to get to those bolts, which then I had to either cut and or drill out the old ones so I could put the new ones in. On each side you can see, because I'm not a welder, I didn't weld those two new bolts in place, but I did use some JB Weld. I'm hoping that these rear shocks will never have to be replaced again, but if they do, and that JB Weld doesn't hold that bolt in place, then we'll just have to take this stuff off again. But I'm thinking with 220,000 miles and this vehicle is 13 years old, that this might be the first and only time that we have to replace those. So here is where I cut this. So after I get it put back together, yeah, there'll be a little slice there, but who gives a shit? I wasn't about to take this whole goddamn thing out. There's just no way. Anyways, the other thing I'm going to mention is that mounting bracket. Getting that off the shock was extremely difficult. For one of them, I ended up using, where is it? I'll show you what first happened. I tried using this to hold the top of the shock, and you can see what happened there. That snapped like fucking nothing. So what I ended up using to get out one of them, to get one of them off, I used one of my 18mm closed end for the bolt, and then I used this wrench. I was able to put that on the end of the shock to hold the bolt in place while I put a lot of pressure down on it, and I eventually got it to come off, but it was extremely difficult. The other one, I used the same technique, but that was even more difficult, and it wouldn't come. So what I ended up doing, I ended up cutting off, here you can see it, this is the top of the shock. I used my angle grinder to cut off this bolt even with the top of the mounting bracket. So I cut that off and I started drilling. Here, let me grab the shock and you can see. Yeah, here. I drilled down it a little bit, but there's enough bolt left there. You can see that after I drilled in there and I cut it off, I mounted, or I attached a vice grip to the neck there. I clamped it down really hard, and then I obviously, using a socket instead of the closed and wrenched, I had a socket with some good leverage. I was able to get that nut loosened and get the mounting bracket off. But here you can see the two shocks. This one on the left here is totally dead. It's not even, look at that. This thing here is supposed to be like up to here. This is totally worthless. It's doing nothing. It's like not even having a shock in there. So I got it in, I got everything put back together, got everything tightened down. Now I just have to put the rest of this back end back together. Everything's pretty straightforward, like I said, with the exception of, I didn't know how the hell to get these off, but you pop this up, like I said, and there's a screw in there and you can get it out. So I'm gonna, taking all this shit out the back end really wasn't that time consuming. The most time consuming thing was figuring out how this comes undone. That was one. Second thing was using my angle grinder, or my angle grinder, to cut out the sheet metal so I could have access to that. Cutting off the bolts, the one in front, that one there, I was able to shave off with the grinder. The back one, I had to drill out. Same with on this side. So, and then the other time consuming thing was actually getting the shock removed from the mounting bracket. That was a real pain in the ass too. But I'm gonna put everything back together. I pushed down on the truck now, and it's not bouncing at all, so we're good. Hopefully, if you run into that issue, this video will help you out. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. Thank you.